that are early. Here's what I'm going to do. We'll get started in a second, but up on your screen right now is a quick little overview of what to do to make sure you get a copy of the slides, as well as all the content we've ever done for Built. My name is Jim Ryerson. I'm with Sales Octane. We are a sales training and sales consulting company, and we've done work for years now with the Built team members. And all of that content is available on a site. All we need you to do is just text the word execute, lowercase uppercase, makes no difference, to that telephone number there. And then if you would please, when you get in there, make sure that you click the box that yes, my company is part of a larger company or association, and enter the word Built. Even if you are not a Built member, it's helpful for us to know which site to send you to. So if you would kindly do that at the very end, right at the 60-minute mark, I'll close and I'll put it up again for those of you who arrive a little bit later, or if you didn't get a chance to do it. So again, what we're going to do in this conversation is basically talk about how to sell in a post-COVID world. Everything that we talk about today, the slides, the recording, everything will be posted. All you need to do is text execute to that number. Also, Built will be sending out a link to the video file so you can watch it later, because I'm gonna go like a jackrabbit on crack through this, just in terms of giving you a lot of information, and then you can go back and sort through what works best for you. In our book, Execute, which is how to sell in a distracted world, and Lord knows we are distracted right now with a lot of change and a lot of issues. You have two choices when you have issues in life. One is to get bitter and one is to get better. Now, it's okay to be bitter for a period of time, but your focus should always be moving forward to, how am I going to get better? That's absolutely critical. And time is of the essence. We think the tail on COVID is going to go for salespeople probably into the quarters, if not maybe a year from now, before things will be back to normal, whatever that looks like. So we want to give you a couple of ideas in this brief period of time, kind of some checklist items that you can start to focus on. Now, if you read the book, Selling by the Book today, we talk about the waves of change. And frankly, COVID is just accelerating all of the waves that you were experiencing prior to COVID. For instance, wave number one was 10,000 a day. That started back in the mid 2006, 2007, that 10,000 people a day retired. And when the people retire, that means new people come in. And when new people come in, that's a great opportunity for you to engage. Also, with COVID, guess what's happening? Companies, in an effort to reduce their cost, are doing a lot of early retirement. So the 10,000 a day is actually accelerated because of COVID. The second thing we talked about with the waves was career hopping. You know that prior to COVID, under the age of 32, they were changing jobs about every 36 months. 2 to 3 years, they would change jobs. Now, this is great news for great salespeople, because guess what happens? With people retiring, that opens up a new seat. Somebody goes in there, and perhaps it's somebody that's younger who is going to change seats within 2 to 3 years. They take your goodness everywhere. That's why we talk about the fact that there's going to be a revolving doors in companies, and COVID's just going to accelerate the spinning of that door. So we have to get really deep and really wide with our connections. Now, prior to COVID, I always talked about the fact that, hey, networking's important. If you're not networking, you're not working. Here's the problem. You can't network right now. Yes, digitally, virtually, but it's not the same. And clearly, things have changed. So we have to take networking for the time being off the table. So what do? Well, the next wave was unified communications. We talked about the fact that it's getting harder and harder to get someone on the phone, with phone blocking, with other challenges. Well, what's happened now with COVID? Most of these folks, if your customers were working out of a building, they're now working out of their home. It's even harder to get a hold of people, and more of them are working via mobile, which makes the unified communications even more of an issue. And if that's not enough, no one's got any time right now. It is Time is a new currency was what we said several years ago. Now it's just accelerated because of COVID. So with all of that, and you're like, well, Jim, where's the good news? Can we move from the bitter to the better? Yes. What is the common element that you can use right now as the sales pro? I don't care what your job is. I don't care what you're selling. There's one common denominator that we are still having success with during COVID, and post-COVID will not change that. And that is the issue of a referral. You have to have either a warm connection or a flat out referral. And frankly, you've got the greatest opportunity ever within the built structure. Remember this slide we talked about, they call them circles of influence. Again, back to the networking phase of life. We always said when you're out networking, you should be looking for other salespeople that don't compete with you, other salespeople that sell other products to the same type of customer that you are trying to get in front of, especially now. You should be connecting with those individual salespeople and understand what is in their network. I mean, that is ultimately the essence of Built. You have a group of people that come together. You're all calling on basically the same end user or same type of customer. So the question becomes, how do we leverage that now more than ever in COVID and post-COVID times? And keep in mind, there is one person that, or one title that is always available to answer the phone right now. You know who that is? You. You're the sales pro. You're dying right now to get people, customers on the phone. So you have time to talk to other sales pros and leverage networks and find opportunities to get a warm referral. Working together as a Built community will allow you to do that. Now, a little over a year ago, there was a speaker at a Built convention. His name was Paul Anderson, great guy from OFS. And he had gotten up there and he threw this question out. He said, this is a great question to ask people, is how do I know if someone I'm talking to is a good client for you? Like, how would I know if I'm hanging out with you in a networking environment or over the phone? Let me ask you a question. How would I know if someone that I'm working with or somebody that I'm talking to or one of my customers might be a good client for you? Brilliant question. Aligns with a lot of research. Back in our book, Selling by the Book Today, we said that one of the 14 characteristics of a sales professional, not a salesperson, but a sales pro, the pro is generous. They're more interested in giving than they are in getting. Now, the principle still exists. When you give, you receive. That's the principle. It works. The essence is lead with giving. They were pivoting during Paul's presentation. He was pivoting off the book, The Go-Giver, and a number of you have probably read that book. It's a great book. It's a fable. It's a parable, but it gets to the point of the importance of being someone that is being generous and giving opportunities and connecting with other people and breathing life into them. But there's also science behind this. Yes, that was a well-written book with spot-on content. But if you want the research, you can go read the book Give and Take by Adam Grant. Now, Adam Grant from Wharton School of Business did the research, and the research showed that the givers always exceed those who are the takers. Not out of the gate, not out of the gate, not out of the gate, but longer term, weeks, months, quarters, the givers are the people who ultimately grow. So here's the question. If we're going to give and help other people in our network in an effort to receive some connections that they have, that they would introduce us to, how would you do that? Well, back to the question. I left that event absolutely convicted. That is a great question. So when I learned something that I am super excited about, I implement it, I execute it. So I had started asking this question in networking events. I would hang out with people and I would say, so, hey, what do you do? And they tell me what they do. Or maybe I would just go straight to, so let me ask you a question. How do I know if someone that I'm talking to might be a good client or is a good client for you? And the question didn't work. And it didn't work because every time I would ask a salesperson that question, they would always just hurl on me what they do. Well, if they need this product, or if they need this, or if they need an engineer, if they needed this, if they need an HVAC, here's the dilemma. And it took me about an hour to figure this out. We have a problem as salespeople, and that we tell people what we do. And that's not why people buy from us. People buy from people that they like. That's the psychology of selling. They buy from people that they know, that they like, and that they trust. And that trust factor is one of the critical elements of getting referrals. I'm not going to give you the name of somebody that I know that you want to talk to sell your product or service if I don't like you. And like and trust go together. But flip it the other side. That prospect that you desperately want to get a hold of right now, that you need more leads, you need leads to prospect to. Understand that those leads are probably not going to answer your message unless there is a transfer of trust. And the transfer of trust is that referral. Absolutely critical. So wind the tape back. So what do we do, Jim? Well, number one, don't just tell people what to do. Now, here's the research behind this. There are three basic learning styles. Like every single one of you have all three, but there's one that's probably one or two that are most likely leading the charge. We've been using, if you go Google the words, Barsh inventory and use the word free, there are several free variations of the Barsh inventory test. Takes about 5 minutes. At the end of the 5 minutes, it's going to tell you whether you're an auditory learner, like you're really good at listening, like you're just an amazing listener. You listen more than you talk. Then there's kinesthetic. Those are the people that have to work with it. They have to play with it. They need to get that. They tell me a story about what to do, because you need to work them through kinesthetically. What's the angle on this? And then there's those visual learners, people that look and see, and they learn by what they see. So those are the three different learning styles. So we've been testing people on this for years. And here's what we started to realize early on. By and large, salespeople are not auditory learners. They're not good at listening. So if you go into a networking environment, somebody said, hey, if I met someone, how would I know if they might be a good lead for you? If I got a pretty decent Salesforce.com, Jim, that's loaded with connections. I got Microsoft Dynamics. I got a spreadsheet of amazing clients, Jim. You tell me, what are you looking for? If you tell them what you do, number one, they're probably not going to even listen anyway, because here's the reality. By and large, you're a kinesthetic and visual learner. You need to show them or story, kinesthetic story, bring them into a story in terms of what you do, how you do it, who you're looking for. That's going to be critical. Now that's your learning style. So if you're going to start asking people, hey, how would I know? If they just tell you what they do, auditorily, it's in one ear and out the other. And then secondly, chances are you're not going to think of it down the line. So what about them? Well, here's the other thing. What about when they flip it back to you and they go, what about you, Jim? I've got a pretty decent connection, bunch of databases, a lot of clients that love our products and service. How would I know who you would want to talk to, Jim, so I can give you some referrals? Well, here's the dilemma there. By and large, this is the way you take in information. Like when you retain information later, 55% of what you retain from a conversation is what is done visually, what you saw. Could be the dynamics of the person, which you might be able to see over Zoom, but over the phone, there's no visual. And vocal, that's only if they tell a good story and they have good enunciation. By and large, you're probably stuck with words, 7% of what they retain. So in a networking environment, or what we'll show you a little bit later, when you get on the phone now and move to some type of a screen share, and I'm just going to use the word Zoom because it's universally accepted, whether it's Teams or Zoom or Google Meeting, whatever, get into that mode because of what you're looking at the screen right now. If you can introduce visual into a conversation, it exponentially increases the probability that they will remember later. So that's little homework for about 25 minutes from now. But for now, recognize if you just show up and throw up and tell people what you do, by and large, they're not going to engage with it. Period. End of conversation. But even if they got it in the moment, what's the statistical probability when they get back into their life and now they're meeting with other customers and they meet with somebody that actually does fit what you're looking for? Will they remember it? Well, one more psychology of selling principle, principle number 18, the principle of short-term memory. You can only keep 7 to 10 items in your short-term memory for about 15 to 30 seconds. And if you go, Jim, my brain's not that good, it's even worse. That means you have children or you're working from home. And those 7 to 10 are getting knocked out nonstop. And the interruptions are nonstop and the noise is nonstop. There's actually a term for this. It's called, ready for this? Digital dementia. It's like there's just so much coming at us today that our brains are chaotic. Your customers are the same way. How are you going to sell in a post-COVID world? Number one, you better master this platform we're on right now. Because for the next several quarters, you're going to go this route. I came from the office furniture industry for commercial office furniture industry for 25 years. I read all the chatter, I know all the people, and the reality is they're coming to a quick conclusion in that marketplace that unfortunately some companies are beginning to realize that, not everybody needs to come back. Which means if you're selling and even one of the people on the committee is working remotely, your only way to engage them is visually and make an impact. So bottom line is we've got to get to the point when somebody starts to ask us, so what do we do? How would I know if somebody would be a good connection for you? We've got to get to the point where we can visually, almost like show them, either in story or preferably visually, what we're looking for, so that down the line when they start actually walking through buildings and going on site, they will see it. When they get in meetings and they're hanging out with other people and somebody says something that ties into something that you showed them, they get it. When networking resumes, and it will resume. When networking resumes, now is the time to fine-tune your pitch, your story, your angle. And when this starts to happen, you're going to be well ahead of the other salespeople out there. You are the sales pro. Now, we're going fast with this, and now I'm going to show you how to do it and how to put the content together. But there are videos. You can go to Shot of Octane. And again, I did it at the top of the hour. You'll see it again right before we finish. I'll throw up another slide. Make sure your mobile phone is handy, and I'm going to ask you to text the word execute to a particular telephone number. You'll get access to a link. Then you can download Shot of Octane, which is a free app on the marketplace that has hundreds of videos. And video 173, 174, and 175, and soon to be 176, covers this content in far more detail. Almost, it's basically a workshop. But let me just kind of walk you through what that workshop would entail so that you get a flavor before you get off the webinar today of how this might look. What we found was there's a couple of different things you really need to prompt people with so they can understand and see who in their network might be a good connection for you. And the first one right out of the gate are what are called demographics. Now, the word demographic literally means a particular sector of the population. That's what a demographic is. It's something you can measure, you can see, you can get your arms around it. And clearly the 4 demographics that you want to go deep on are, what is the geographic footprint where I sell my product or service? So just start thinking about it right now. If you've got something to write on, Remember, when you write, you're actually a little bit smarter. So if you get a chance, just write, what is your geographic footprint? Are you international? Are you primarily in the Midwest? What are the states you call on? Are you in an individual city? But having a geographic focus, if that's where you sell, is critical to tell people. Number two is industry. What industry do you sell into? Critical are titles. What are the titles of the people that you typically call on? And then last week we include other, because there was always something. Every time we would try this out, when we were putting this system together, every time we would try it out, there would be something that wouldn't fall into geographic, wouldn't fall into industry, wouldn't fall into titles. So we put it into other. Now, if you were in Sea Island, Georgia, the start of the year, right before COVID, and you were at the fantastic Built National event, you know that we did a breakout session on this, and all the flip charts of all the content is literally online. So at the end, when you text that number and follow the instructions from our team, you can get access to this. We're open. We want to give you as much as we possibly can to help you become successful. So we had a lot of ideas, but let me just give you a couple of what we came up with. Now, industries, a geographic is geographic, that's going to be unique for each one of you. Demographics, maybe you'll find something on this demographic list that you go, oh yeah, I call on that demographic industry. I call on that market, but you need to write these down. What are the markets that you call on? And if it's anybody, Jim, just recognize that the larger it is, like, oh, anybody can use anybody who needs this, anybody who needs this, lower your forecast. Because if it's too broad, people can't see it. You're actually not helping yourself by going, we can do business with anyone, because if it's anyone, it's too big, the brain gets cluttered. Hey, great meeting you. I'll talk to you. How's never? Never soon enough for you. I mean, that's the way it's going to go. So try to get as tight as you can. Now, give you a little clue here. Clearly, you need to be the one to ask the question. How would I know if I'm working with somebody or one of my clients might be a good fit for you? You need to be the one to start that conversation. Because if you start prompting them with the same questions that we've got up here, like, well, geographically, where do you go? What kind of industries do you call on? Guess what's going to happen? You're going to force them to see what you need to know so that you can see who you know that could help them. Critical element is you need to be the first one to take the move out of the gate. Tell me, how would I know if I'm working with somebody like one of my clients? How would I know if they might be a good fit for you? You can start with, so what do you do? And they'll tell you. It'll just be, well, I sell this, I sell that. Make no mistake, not going to help you. But if I can prompt them with, well, what are the industries that you call on? Or more important, the next one, titles. Who do you typically call on? What are the titles of the people that you call on? Now, this is essential. I mean, in the next webinar where Colleen talks about LinkedIn and goes deeper into LinkedIn, make no mistake, if you know the titles of the people that your customers are looking for, it makes it a lot easier for you to help them. Remember, the whole focus of this is getting warm leads, because in COVID time and post-COVID time, all of the waves of change are not going to go away. It's going to be more challenging to get in front of people. They have no time. Many of them will continue forever to work from home. And they're talking to you on a mobile device. And once they block you because they thought you were spam, you will never be seen again on their mobile device. You can call, you can text, It will never show up. These are critical times to work your network. So take a second and just write down, and again, you see the list here. Pick a couple on there that are your titles. And I have to believe that given the number of people on this web meeting, there are a lot of you that call on other titles. Here's the beautiful thing. This never ends. This is a process that you begin today and that you just keep refining. You keep getting better. You keep getting better. You keep getting better. And you learn which titles, which angles, which industries really connect with people. And then last but not least, the other. Here were the other. There were 3 that were on that list when we had a group of about 50 people down in Georgia in that room. I'm sorry, CLN, Georgia, in that room where we were going through. Hey, I work with people that have greater than 20 offices, 1 million square feet in a national portfolio, and there was something about span-of equipment. I don't know what your other is, but the key is, if you do nothing else today, get very tight on where your product is used, what industries is it sold into, and what are the titles that you call on. Get that list. But don't stop there. The second piece that we found out was demographic is one. That's who you call on. That's the industry that typically uses your product. But there's this other issue of why do people use your product? Like, why would they decide to go with you versus something else, versus what they're currently using, versus the status quo? Why do people go with you? And then also when? I mean, what prompts them to move forward? What's that initiative? What's that inciting incident? Now, we put a label over that. We call motivations. So one is the demographics. Who do I call them? But next, what are the motivations? Like, why do people go with your product? Now, this takes a little more work. This is some heavy lifting, and you'll want to do this as a group. So again, when you watch videos 173, 174, 175, and 176, which they're workshop videos, and you can literally play them with your team to get some ideas. Because the more people you have, the more light bulbs will go off. But your focus is not to lead from the solutions that you offer as much as it is, what problems do you help people with? What problems do customers have where they would need your product or service? Now, how do you do this? An easy way right out of the gate is you've got video 151. Now, video 151, again, free video on the app. Download the app, play the video. It's broken into 4 segments, but it's basically a critical video about how to create better questions. So that's the video, is developing great questions. And what we find when we go out and do national sales meetings and sales trainings all over the country, what we find is most salespeople don't ask great questions. They show up and they talk about their product and service. But here's the problem. Go back to the research. 55% of what they take away is visual. Only 7% is auditory. Even if you're a really good talker, add 38 and 7. I'm terrible at math, but that's 45%. You're still under 50-50. You've got to get good at asking great questions so that you enter the customer's story. Now, if those of you have been selling forever, and we get a lot of those people in the conversation in our conferences, we ask, hey, write down the questions that you ask your customers. And in many cases, the essence of the question is good, but the execution is not good. They don't follow what we call the 3.5. You'll see that on the bottom of the screen. Apply the 3.5. What are the 3.5 rules of great questions? Watch the video. But the key here is start with your feature, benefit, and advantages. What is it your product's known for? But dig deep now and identify what problem each one of those resolve. What are the problems that you resolve? Because those problems are critical to identifying what the motivations are in terms of why or when somebody buys from you. So we created, for the purposes of the workshop, 6 different areas. We're like, okay, so what are the challenges that your customers have where they would engage with you? What are some of the problems that your customers are trying to solve? What is an initiative? For instance, right now, one of the initiatives might be downsizing real estate space. That may be in a niche. We want to get a new building, but it's going to be a smaller footprint because what's that driven by? Well, we have a problem. We can't get people back into the office. We're trying to cut our, what's the challenge? COVID's impact our bottom line. Therefore, we don't have the money. Therefore, we're going to shrink our footprint. I mean, you can start to see how these all, you could put any one of your items under any of these 6, but the key is these are meant to prompt you. Issues, what are the issues that a customer would have when you would engage with them? Write those down. And then these last 2 elements are what are called insights and status quo. Now, this is an interesting conversation right now because we don't have evidence as to how COVID is impacting this. But in general, there are a number of insights that are now surfacing around people working from home, the stress related to home, different workplace methodologies. You're in the building trades. A number of you are selling products that are used in that physical space. You need to be the thought leader with some insights on this. You need to be out there. So again, spend some time thinking about, well, what's some insight that we have? For instance, I've read a number of blogs recently that said we've got to get the people back to the office so that we increase collaboration. Well, is there evidence of that? How might working from home decrease collaboration? Well, we've got Zoom, Jim. We can use Zoom. Okay, what's the insight around the efficacy of using Zoom versus getting people in a room? Those are some insights you may want to start to dig in and maybe even write a blog every so often, post it to your LinkedIn so people go, wow, you're a thought leader. Because here's what you're going to find. The minute that you begin prospecting someone today, they will check you out on LinkedIn. And the question is, what do they see when they get there? The last one is status quo. And we've got the circle in this, we're Xing it out because we don't want people to just maintain the status quo because status quo is probably our competitor. If you're calling on a new prospect, by virtue of that, they have or they are buying from somebody else. So you have to, quote unquote, disrupt the status quo. So what are some ways that you're disrupting the status quo? Hard things to work through, but here's the deal. Selling in a post-COVID world requires this. Why? Because your customers are doing far more online. They're checking you out. The Forrester research said that customers are 60% of the way through the buying decision before they ever engage with a salesperson. That was pre-COVID. Which means, boy, it's going to, when you get in front of somebody, you've got to absolutely slay it with great questions and understanding the customer's story. Critical. That takes great questions. So now, you go through that process and you'll have flip charts full of, well, here's the titles, here's the geography, here's the industries that we go after. And Jim, it was harder, but we do have, some of the problems or the situations that customers are in when they need our product or service. So we've got that. Now what do we do? Well, let's think about it. You go out and you meet with somebody and you start the process. How would I know if someone I'm talking to is a good client for you? And they will, I guarantee you, they will tell you what they do. Well, if they're looking for this and that, but here's the deal. You're going to help them. Why? Because you're the generous sales pro. How are you going to help them? You're going to start to scratch a little bit. Well, what's the geography like? Where do you typically sell into? Because guess what? Maybe their geography aligns beautifully with your geography. Increase your forecast. Number 2, so what are some of the industries that use your product or service? And guess what you're going to find? By asking them a great question, what are some of the industries? They're going to start not ripping them off, by the way. They'll go a little bit slow. Matter of fact, oftentimes you'll see them look up. Sometimes you'll even hear this statement. That's a great question. Here's why. You can only keep 7 to 10 things in your short-term memory for 15 to 30 seconds. They were not prepared for this question. They've lived their life showing up and throwing up and telling people what they do. You asked them, how would I know? They let it go. And all of a sudden you're the sales pro and you begin to help them by asking them, help me, help you. What's your geography? tell me, what are some of the industries? Who are some of the, what are the titles of the people that you call on? And a lot of times you have to scratch on this one because they know they're supposed to say, oh, I call on the C-suite. Okay, the C-suite, chief financial officer or chief, property, and dig deeper, because the reality is they may want to get to the C-suite, wonderful, but who typically do they end up getting caught with? What are those gatekeepers that they get stuck with? Because that's where you're going to begin to see, literally, as they begin to walk these titles before you, you'll know which titles that you call on. And when you find a common title and a common industry, you go to the next thing. So it would go like this. Hey, how would I know if somebody, boom, what's the demographic? What's the motivation? But once you ask that question and you've scratched away for a while, you're going to always, 100% of the time, they'll say this, what about you? So if Jim Ryerson goes out and networks and he catches people and he meets them, I'm Jim Ryerson and you are, and I get their name and I say, where are you from? What do you do? Have a little conversation. And they go, so let me ask you a question. You're in sales. How would I know if someone I'm talking to, somebody that I'm working with, would be a good client for you? They will tell me what they do, and then I scratch demographic motivation. As soon as you've gotten enough information to be able to help them, watch what happens. They're going to flip it back and they're going to say what's on that screen. Well, what about you, Jim? Now, they wouldn't use the same words because they've already forgot them, but they'd go, what about you? Who do you like to sell to? I mean, they'll butcher it. But what they're basically asking is, Jim, thank you. Thank you for telling me that you actually know somebody or a couple of people that might be good connections for me. Thank you, Jim. What about you? How can I help you? Well, here's the deal. You're not going to tell them what you do. Not like in this stream like they did to you. You're going to say, you know what, it's a great question. Typically, we're working in such and such a geographic area. You cover the demographics. We call on these titles. I typically work in this industry. And oftentimes our customers are, and and what's happening is, if you go slow with this and you're good at telling that story, an amazing thing happens. They begin to see things. For example, I just had a customer the other day, boom. Now, this is a big diversion and has applications far beyond just getting referrals. But it's critical because you're now going to have great questions when you get in front of a customer. You're going to understand the problems that you solve. You're going to understand exactly how to spin it. You're going to understand how to maintain or disrupt the status quo. You're going to understand what issues are out there that are relevant to your customer. And boom, you're going to show them how you can help. Here's what will happen. You master the process. You get a couple of names. Now what? That's where LinkedIn comes in. I would not pick up the phone right away. I would not make a call. Now, in the next webinar, you're going to go deeper on LinkedIn, but I want to give you one thing that you absolutely have to learn today. And I'm going to guess, based on the number of people on here, maybe 5% of you know these 3 clicks. But the essence is, once you understand titles and names, titles or people, what if they can't remember a name? Maybe they give you one name. Oh, you call on facility managers? Yeah, so do I. I call on, do you know, and you said you call on K through 12. Have you ever gone over to XYZ K through 12 place? And you go, God, I'd love to get a connection over there. Well, I know Rhonda, and they give you that one name. We want to turn this on steroids. I don't want one name. I want a lot, but I may not get it at that point. I know now the titles that they call on. I know the titles that I want to find in their network. So how do I put faces to the titles? How do I make this like a machine? Like it just cranks and cranks and cranks. Next technique. You've now got this question and you're like, but Jim, there's no networking, right? We know who's available to answer the phone today? You. There are salespeople that are freaking out right now. You may be one of them. That's why you're on this call. It's like, I gotta, Jim, I gotta find, it's tough to get people, which means you have some time on your hands. Why don't you call other Built members? And, or if you're not a Built member, why don't you identify those circles of influence, other companies that don't compete with you, and call a salesperson at that company and get on the screen with them. Critical to move from the phone to the screen as quickly as you can. Master the screen share. And if you're like, Jim, I hate screen share. I'm a face-to-face kind of person. So am I. But the world has changed. Post-COVID is never going to end. COVID will end. But the idea of having more of your customers, your prospects, working remotely will never go away. It will descend a bit in the quarters to come, but it is not going away. The research is deafening, where customers are going, you know what, we've learned something in this. We can, in fact, work. It's not maybe as it, but well, you can save a ton of money. And we can argue all day long. Remember, I came from the furniture industry. This kills me too. But the reality is, got to figure out a new way to navigate. All I'll say is master the screen share. That's it. That's all I'll say. But when you get that salesperson from Built, somebody that you haven't talked to in a while, or maybe you've never talked to, maybe they're new to Built, this is a great time to say, hey, how can I help you? How would I know if somebody that I'm working with today might be a good lead for you? As soon as you send that email or leave that voicemail message, what other salesperson is not going to call you back with that lead in? When you get them on the phone, you move to that screen as quickly as you can. So perhaps right now it's emails and they respond back, yeah, I'd love to, got nothing going on. I'm over here at home, got the kids in the back swing, I can't wait till things return to normal. Just say, let's do this. When are you going to be able to jump on the internet? Now, if they answer the phone and you go, hey, let's do this. Let's just, let's jump on the internet. That's why you've got to master this. Why? Because 55% of what they're about to take away from your conversation is what they see. I like those odds. And you will be talking. You're now in the 60, 70, 80% hit rate. And you go, well, Jim, what if, for whatever reason, they're calling from a place where there is no connection? Just say, hey, well, if you got access right now, let's jump on a quick screen share. No access, you tell me when would be a good time. I would rather have that conversation on a screen share than just voice to voice on the phone any day of the week. And one day you will be able to sit down with people, go to lunch, go to breakfast, sit down and hang out and take out your laptops and all of your, Salesforce.com and Microdynamics, and you can share all these leads. But for now, this is where we're at in COVID and post-COVID for at least a couple more quarters. So now you engage them. You show them on the screen. You give them some illustrations of some pre and post applications of your product. You've talked about the titles that you call on. You're back and forth, and they give you the name of somebody. So now you're on the receiving end. You've given some names. Now they go, you know who you ought to talk to. Oh, who's that? And they give you a name. Now you have this connection. First and foremost, do your best to have them intermediate this. A couple talking points that we'll use when we do training is just say to them, hey, so Rhonda Smith, you think she'd be good? Oh yeah, she's a perfect client for you. And I'm doing business with Rhonda right now. It's a little quiet because of COVID, but you would love Rhonda. Don't say, great, what's Rhonda's number? I'm gonna give her a call. Say, hey, let me ask you a question. I'm sure Rhonda's pretty busy and gets a lot of calls, unsolicited calls. It would really be helpful if you would be willing to, and keywords there are really be helpful and willing to. Research shows that when you say willing to, people tend to do it more often. Kind of weird, but it would really be helpful, because in North America, this doesn't work in other places. In North America, it works. We like to be helpful. So when I say it would really be helpful if you would be willing to, I double down on the psychology, and now it's like, it would really be helpful if you would be willing to just ping Rhonda. Let her know who I am. Now you've got a warm introduction. Still don't pick up the phone. Absolutely critical, because these are such an important conversation with the Rhonda Smiths in this situation that you want to really go deeper before you make the call. And number two, when I'm talking to that salesperson, before I have that little web conversation with them, I'm going to do a little bit of research. So what I want you to do right now is, if you have the ability, and this is only if you have two screens, which, by the way, every single one of you needs to get two screens, because in a screen share world where you're beginning to do more screen share meetings, you must have two screens. I have three. There's one over here. That's one you're looking at. I'm looking into this one with all my notes and all the stuff and the time and everything else. And over here is the third one with my normal stuff. So everything's multiple screens. So if you've got two screens, do me a favor, go to your other screen and open up a browser and go to LinkedIn. Just open up a browser and go to LinkedIn. For those of you who can't do this, or you're afraid to touch the one screen that you've got for fear of blowing up the webinar, it's fine. You'll get the screenshot in just a second. I call it 1, 2, 3, and it's free because it rhymes. You'll remember that. 1, 2, 3. 3 simple steps that, by and large, we're finding 100% of our customers, when we get in a room and show this little technique to, they're like, I didn't know you could do this, because it's kind of hidden. So let's kind of go through the process. Here's what I want you to do. If you have a screen share, a second screen, open it up to LinkedIn. I want you to go in with your cursor to the search bar. So you're looking at the screen right now. If you've got a second screen, maybe you can do this on a tablet, but I've not tried it myself personally. But if you go to the search bar, I want you to hover the cursor in the search bar and press the cursor. So hover the cursor and hit enter a second. And what will pop up is another line underneath it that says people, jobs, content, companies, schools, groups. And what I want you to do is I want you to press the word people. Now, once you press the word people, another screen comes up, and you'll see there on, you're watching the video right now, you'll see the word all filters, which is over to the right. So I'm going to give you another 30 seconds to do this. But what I'd like you to do is just click on search, click on people, click on all filters. I'm going to toggle a second, but it will look something like this. So when you get there, it'll look something like that. Let me go back. Hit the search, hit people, hit all filters. I would love to know, just go to chat. If you can find the chat a minute, if you can ping, all panelists or just Jim Ryerson, I'm fine. I would love to do a quick little poll, if you will. How many of you have ever clicked those buttons in that order and gotten to this screen? If you have, go to chat and type in yes. Gotten 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't have to tell me if it's no. I just want the yeses. Going once, going twice. So it looks like it's 14 out of over 100 people. That means, terrible at math, but it looks like it's somewhere around 86% of you have received a really good insight today. Because once you're on the screen that you're looking at right now, you can go into your customer's profile, Rhonda Smith, the prospect that I want to go into, and I can identify what other titles that I call on Rhonda is connected to. And I can go in and I can tighten down the geography. I can put all kinds of different modifiers. Now, what kinds of modifiers can you do with this? For that, go to LinkedIn. So there's the URL. You'll get it later. A very simple URL to go to that LinkedIn tells you how to do what's called the Boolean search logic. But you're going to need to start to tighten down what are those search strings. And if you're like, Jim, I'm over the age of 50, man, I don't do this. Looks like programming, dude. I'm 61. I do it. It took a little bit of learning, but it's absolute money, because once you get into that first degree connection, the salesperson that you are going to call from another company that you don't compete with. You're going to make a call to them today and say, hey, how you faring in COVID? Hey, I'm a member of Bill, you're a member of Bill, I'm in sales, you're in sales. We don't compete with each other. Question. I'd like to jump online and have a conversation with you because it's possible that I have some connections that might be good leads for you. What salesperson is not going to return that call? But before you have the conversation, I want you to take that salesperson's LinkedIn. I want you to go to their connections, and I want you to put the titles that you want. And all of a sudden, in the geography that you work in, even in the industry that you work in, with the titles that you want, LinkedIn will tell you who they have in their network already. Now, doesn't mean that they know these people. There's a lot of you that have people, and myself included, that have contacts in my LinkedIn that I've not met, or I don't remember when I met them. But the key is I will remember a few. And the more you put in front of me, within reason, the more you put in front of me, the greater the probability that I will see, I will not remember, I will see visually a name of somebody that I hadn't thought about for a while. But boy, if that would be somebody that would be a good connection for you, yeah, I know them. And then you get that contact going. Now, think about this. We're stuck right now in that it's just tough to get a hold of people. I get that. Selling, meaning right now it's basically all prospecting, because the subsequent steps in the sales process that we talk about, like once you get an appointment, that appointment's likely to be on a screen share. Hence, get good at screen share. Next, practice that screen share on other salespeople using this technique. It takes a while to get good at this system. So practice, but not on your customers. And then next, once you get the salesperson on the phone or the customer on the phone, web meeting, whatever, always start with something along the empathetic route. And here's what we're finding. I wrote a link, it was posted on LinkedIn. I wrote a blog about this probably about a month into COVID, and received a lot of really good chatter back when people go, I never thought about it. Do you think that everybody that's working from home is having an absolute ball? The answer is no. A lot of people, it's really, some of you, I've talked to a number of you over the course of the last several weeks. And, this is not easy. Some of you, you love it. You've always been doing it. But there's a good chance that your customer has not always been doing it. Therefore, this is a disruption in their world. This is a common denominator with everyone experiencing COVID. It's a disruption. For your customers, it's almost always a disruption because they were never working from home. So when you get on the phone, take a minute up front to be real and just start, so where do, hey, where did I find you from today? So I get that warm introduction from my built friend to Rhonda Smith, because I said it would really be helpful if you would be willing to just ping Rhonda with an email or a voicemail or a call and just let her know who I am, because I'm sure she's getting a lot of calls, unsolicited calls. Let's say that your built partner makes that email or that text message or whatever and says, yeah, we're good. She's expecting your call, or she's busy right now. When you get Rhonda on the phone, after you say, hey, Rhonda, thanks again for taking my call. I was so thankful to Pete for hooking us up. Get to this as quickly as you can. So where am I finding you today? Because I'm working from my home. I got my family outside the door. Spin it a bit, because people buy from people that they like. They like authentic people. They like genuine people. So figure out a way to use COVID-19 up front to level the playing field. Because what you're likely to hear is, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to go back to the office. And you are now having a genuine conversation. And then what do you do next? Ask some questions regarding problems, challenges, issues, insights. Where did those questions come from? From your work that you did on video 151, so that you're queued up to do this work in a post-COVID world, COVID world and a post-COVID world, with sales pros just like you that don't compete with you. So what's the next step? Take a minute to figure out, okay, so what do I need to do? I'll give you a couple of ideas. Number one is text the word execute to that phone number. This costs you nothing. We do not spam you. We do none of that. This is just simply when you text execute to that phone number, and I really appreciate it if you click the box, yes. You know, even if you're not a Built member and you're just here because of the Built influence, that's fine. At least we kind of know the blood order of how you got into the family. We'll send back the link to how to get the app for free. We'll send back a site that you can go to that has all of the content we've done for Built through the years, which, you know, if you're in sales, there's some quality work that's been done by the Built community. So that's number one, is get into the family. Number two, use this time to get better. One of my lines that I've always used is, you know, practice, but don't practice on customers. Things are changing. The screen share world is a world that we will live in for probably, we're hearing 5 to 10 years. I was just in a meeting yesterday with human resource professionals, and, you know, fairly strong belief, because I asked, is this decades? And they go, probably years. Years meaning 5 to 10, or 5 to 10. 5 to 10 years, they anticipate a good percentage of people will continue to work from home, potentially forever, just because of this situation. You go, well, that's going to be terrible. Bitter, better. Recognize this is a new reality. That just means that many of your customers will be at home. And because of group decisions, by and large, with group decisions, somebody in that group's going to be working from home. So we've got to figure out how to master screen share. So that's the second thing I would do. So number one is get into the family of Built, get connected with this information. Number two, practice, but not on your customers. And we would begin with a screen share, really start to get good. Go out and buy that second monitor, get good at working a 2-monitor system. Research, I'm hearing 14 to 16% productivity improvement, separate of doing a screen share meeting. You'll work faster and better with 2 screens than you will with 1. It is a fact. And if you want a little more information about how to master the screen share meeting, you can go to salesoctane.com under a webinar series, and I have a recorded webinar there of just some best practices. It's some basic, but it's some best practices to help you from falling into some of the traps that many folks do when they do a webinar. And then number 3, invest in video 151. Spend some time there, because here's the deal. It's going to get harder to get in front of people, even if that in front of is right here on the web with a web meeting. It's going to get harder, which means the stakes are higher when you connect with somebody. When the stakes are high, the sales pro leads with great questions. And the only way that you can have great questions is if you're prepared with great questions. And that's what video 151 does. And then as you begin to execute with your with your other salespeople that don't compete with you, as you begin to do that, you can watch videos 173, 174, 175, and 176. And gang, I can't wait for next year, Built National, where I get to see you at the finish line, because that's where it all happens. So thanks again for your time. I'll stay here. I'll leave that screen up for anybody who needs to do it. And then I am set. So we will get chat. I'll get a copy of that if anybody has a question. You cannot unmute yourself on this webinar. If you want to fire something to Zoom webinar chat, I have 15 minutes I can hang out with you. Any questions, even if it's not COVID related, it has to be sales related. But any questions, just race to, oh, thank you. Anything else? Any questions? Any challenges? Anything that you're doing in a COVID post? Do you have any thoughts on upcoming networking events that are going to require people to rewear masks? Oh, great question. It's great. Text did not seem to prompt anything. I can't do that now. Let's do this. I mean, I just got a text that somebody said they texted the the word execute to that telephone number. Can somebody else go to chat and tell me if they followed the instructions and they did get a response back? It worked for me. Okay, so it does work, but okay, so some of you it's not working and some it is. Wow, that's interesting. Okay, I will figure out a separate workaround and send something through the built, maybe retry the number, that could be. I'll figure out how to get what you're looking at right now into an email and send that back through the team. So back to the question about what are you going to do networking with people wearing masks? Oh man, I mean, there's actually science about it. I mean, if you've gone to the grocery store, you know how horrible it is that, you know, you used to walk through a grocery store and people would smile and stuff like that. Now all you see is no smiles. Taking away the smile is a massive game changer. Massive game changer. So I'm just praying that mask situation will get over quick. The next thing, by the way, is after the mouth. I forgot what the term is for your when people watch your mouth, but after the mouth, it's the eyes. So maybe spend a little bit of time with your mask on in front of a mirror and figure out how to spin positive through your eyes. And I'm telling you, it requires so much facial expression, which they can't see anyway. I mean, you have to grin like a Cheshire cat to get those, I call them crow's feet for me, that's when I get the happy squint eye. That may be another route. Today's show had on this, they had to try face shields. Okay. Yeah, there's a great idea, is wear a face shield. So it's not a mask, it's that monster. Now, if you've got good hair, obviously I don't, so I could do the shield without a problem. But if you've got like really good hair, if you're from Georgia, y'all have good hair, then that may be like, oh, I hate those things. But it's a great idea because now you're introducing. There are mask options with clear windows. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Great idea. So maybe go out on the internet and search mask, clear, the facial versions. But yeah, it would make sense that, I mean, all we're trying to do is keep those droplets from moving, apparently. So, yeah, true. Okay, so the clear masks are for people who read lips. So some type of auditory impairment. Great idea. That's beautiful. Okay, so anything else? Anything else? Yes. How do you get a copy of this recording? Well, and I just want to help salespeople. So the folks at Jordan Scala and Built have recorded this. They're going to take the recording, clip off the first 10 seconds when I was still chattering, and they'll probably take off maybe some of this at the end. And they'll take that file and they're going to email it back to you. I'm also going to have the URL that they're going to send you to download the video file. I will include that URL once I get it. I'll include that on that site that you'll get when you text that number. So we got that covered. Anything else? Going once, going twice. Hey, I cannot wait till I'm hanging out face to face with all of you again, physically in a space. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.